Psycho killer, qu'est-ce que c'est? Better run, 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 run away.
To charm her and persuade her, I'm not quite sure, but it was a very good thing that he did. And then Gordon just got her to dress differently, gave her a makeover, and he didn't personally, but got her to have her hair done differently, to dress differently, and to drop her voice a pitch or two, and to stop going in a shrill tone of voice when she got going. It was quite remarkable.
Come right round. Come right round, man.
Now listen, I'm not standing for 20 minutes now. We have become a grandmother of a grandson called Michael.
Psycho killer, qu'est-ce que c'est? Better run, 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 run away.
And I would just like to remember some words of St. Francis of Assisi, which I think are really just particularly apt at the moment. Where there is discord, may we bring harmony. Where there is error, may we bring truth. Where there is doubt, may we bring faith. And where there is despair, may we bring hope.
Psycho killer, qu'est-ce que c'est? Better run, 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 run away.
That she could dominate the others began to become clear that evening as she seized upon questions directed at Canada's Premier Mulrooney about the rocket attack which had deposited debris in his embassy forecourt.
You think of those rockets thrown at your embassy.
We're not thinking of they're far more in your mind than ours, dear. We're not worried about them. Just don't exaggerate them. All right? Got the message?
I think she's very condescending, very haughty, very arrogant. She treats the press very contemptuously. And I think that when you get that kind of treatment, you kind of return it in kind.
Psycho killer, qu'est-ce que c'est? Better run, 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 run away.
There's no evidence that she's a racist, but I don't think there's any evidence either that her natural sympathies lay with liberation movements.
In July 1990, Nelson Mandela met Mrs. Thatcher in London. Throughout her years as Prime Minister, Mrs. Thatcher had been at odds with those Commonwealth countries who wanted tough sanctions imposed on the apartheid government of South Africa.
Psycho killer, qu'est-ce que c'est? Better run, 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 run away.
And people forget at this distance how much of the language of Margaret Thatcher in the 70s was reassurance that Conservatives could live with trade unions. There was very little mention of privatisation.
When people now tend to blame people like Tony Blair and so on for introducing, quote, American electioneering tactics into British politics, not a bit of it. It was Gordon Rees and Margaret Thatcher.
The first announcement came just a day after the Queen's speech. Michael Heseltine informed MPs that local authorities would be able to sell council houses to tenants for at least 30% below the market value. In May, as the strike moved into a third month, allegations of heavy-handed tactics and police brutality were being levelled at Mrs. Thatcher. One flashpoint was Orgreave coking plant near Sheffield, where police used riot gear for the first time since the strike began.
Psycho killer, qu'est-ce que c'est? Better run, 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 run away.
Rupert did actually use all the legal weapons that she had made available. It enabled him to drive a coach and horses through the print unions, who'd always been regarded as, you know, the absolute imperial guard of the trade unions.
On the 24th of January, the workforce went out on strike. Rupert Murdoch sacked them all and within 2 days moved production to Wapping.
Psycho killer, qu'est-ce que c'est? Better run, 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 run away.
Nevertheless, never mind, it's wet outside. I expect they want it to come in. You can't blame them. It's always better where the Tories are.
Psycho killer, qu'est-ce que c'est? Better run, 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 run away.
But it was following the 1970 Conservative election victory that Margaret Thatcher really came to public prominence. As Education Secretary in Edward Heath's cabinet, she put an end to free school milk.
If I could press a button and genuinely solve the unemployment problem, do you think that I would not press that button this instant? Does anyone imagine that there is the smallest political gain in letting this level of unemployment continue? Or that there is some obscure economic religion which demands this level of unemployment as part of its grisly ritual?
The commander of the operation has sent the following message. Be pleased to inform Her Majesty that the White Ensign flies alongside the Union Jack in South Georgia. God save the Queen.
What happens next, Mr. Knott?
Thank you very much.
What's your reaction, Prime
Rejoice at that news.
Psycho killer, qu'est-ce que c'est? Better run, 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 run away.
Marriage to a man of means had enabled Mrs. Thatcher not just to establish a family, but to pursue her political ambitions.
Psycho killer, qu'est-ce que c'est? Better run, 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 run away.
She was very, very unfair to Germany, and that was related to her wartime childhood. I mean, she really never warmed to Germany, and although Germany, I think, is probably the most changed country in the world, actually, in terms of having put its past behind it, she never appreciated that. She always saw behind the face of Herr Kohl the scowl of Hitler, and that was very unfair because, you know, whether one liked Herr Kohl or not, he had been part of the democratization of Germany.
The strained relationship between the German and British leaders was graphically illustrated by dummies aboard a float in the Cologne Carnival of February 1989.
Everyone was expecting what Europeans have come to term a diplomatic handbagging over Germany's failure to agree to the modernization of short-range nuclear weapons.
Margaret Thatcher had a very ambivalent attitude to the Foreign Office. As an institution, she was immensely suspicious of it. She thought, I've always felt she was a little harsh on them, that diplomacy was a sort of form of appeasement.
Relations into a new and better phase. Above all, it was an opportunity for the two leaders to size each other up.
I hate communism. The very first word she says to it, I hate communism.
After leaving office, she would continue to speak out against the European project, even if that meant criticising John Major, the man she had backed for the leadership, and his government's policy.
There are enough opposition politicians and media commentators rocking the boat. We do not expect the elders of our own party to join this unhelpful cause.
Psycho killer, qu'est-ce que c'est? Better run, 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 run away.
Not all observers are quite so enthusiastic. Some allege the sale of council houses has contributed to a shortage in social housing and even fuelled the buy-to-let market.
I think the longer-term impact has been disastrous, frankly. That the public stock of public housing has been irredeemably reduced.
Britain changed the way it did business, and that in turn had an impact on the social fabric of the nation.
Everybody's crazy, materialistically. They're all sort of, because somebody's got a 27-inch telly, I've got to have a 33-inch telly, whether you can afford it or not. That doesn't mean a thing,
In the city of London, the so-called Big Bang of October 1986.
The basic idea was that if you free it up, Britain can compete in the world. and Britain can also be a place where people from all over the world come to compete. And this was essentially fulfilled. And so it's economic liberalisation, it's trade union reform, and it's privatisation. And suddenly we are an open market and we're an open society. And that has huge cultural consequences, economic consequences, social consequences, some of which, you know, make very good satire about yuppies and so forth.
By 1990, however, inflation had risen towards 10% and the economy was on a downturn.
Psycho killer, qu'est-ce que c'est? Better run, 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 run away.
To those waiting with bated breath for that favourite media catchphrase, the U-turn, I have only one thing to say. U-turn if you want to. The ladies not for turning. Europe will be stronger precisely because it has France as France, Spain as Spain, Britain as Britain, each with its own customs, traditions, and identity. It would be folly to try to fit them into some sort of identikit European personality. We have not successfully rolled back the frontiers of the state in Britain, only to see them reimposed at a European level.
Psycho killer, qu'est-ce que c'est? Better run, 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 run away.
It was led by the IRA leader in the maze, Bobby Sands. 2 months later, he died, provoking outrage in the nationalist community. In her memoirs, Mrs. Thatcher refers to this period as the beginning of the time of troubles. The death of Bobby Sands, together with 10 other prisoners, probably recruited more Republicans to the cause of violence and, on a political level, contributed to the strength of Sinn Féin at the expense of the non-violent nationalist party, the SDLP. The IRA wasn't the only source of unrest. While petrol bombs were being thrown in Belfast, rioting erupted on the mainland, beginning in Brixton, South London, in April 1981. The violence and disorder were later said to be on a scale not previously seen in this century in Britain. Government's fiscal policy was not indicted, and neither would it change. Instead, the police would in future be equipped with better riot control equipment. If Euro enthusiasts were dejected, others were alarmed by Mrs. Thatcher's intransigence over a new community charge dubbed the poll tax. It was intended to replace the old rating system and was set for full implementation by April 1990.
I most earnestly believe that I shall be in number 10 Downing Street at the end of this week, and a little bit longer than that.